But the problem I have with, okay, I should slowly conclude, so you will have to suffer a little bit more nonetheless. Okay, I have a systematic, the point is not critique, the point is rather, and I had debates with Buddhists here, and they have admitted, so I'm not bullshitting here, totally at least. The limit, you know what is for me the limit? Look, we know how Buddhism starts, you know. The problem is suffering. All living beings want happiness, want to suffer less. And how to, then what is the source of our suffering, desire, attachment to worldly objects? You know the story. Here comes my first problem, but I will not go into it. If there is a lesson of psychoanalysis, it's precisely that we want to suffer. It's a simple phenomenon like, isn't this so fascinating about, you know, the old film noir, Humphrey Bogart, Robert Mitchum, and so on? Isn't a typical noir scene that, for example, you get a guy, normal guy, suddenly he's seduced by an evil femme fatale. His life is ruined at the end, he's betrayed by her, everything, and at the edge of his death, at the end, somebody tells him, oh my God, now that you know how evil she was, would you like to go back in time and start again avoiding her? And the typical noir answer is, no, it was worth every moment. Even if I know that this is the true noir spirit, you know, even if I know that it's a catastrophe, it was worth it. But that's another problem. What I want to say, what I want to draw your attention to is, first, okay, I have to go quickly, so just a couple of coordinates. The first problem I see, and it's nicely rendered by the first big split in Buddhism between Mahayana and the more traditional early one, is that I think, to put it very naively, Mahayana is for me the source of evil. You know why? Mahayana introduces the notion of bodhisattva. Bodhisattva is the one who did attain enlightenment, got rid of karma, his acts no longer leave traces, but he decides in a non-egotist way, out of sympathy with all other human and even living beings suffering, that he returns to our valley of tears, he postpones his final salvation so that he returns here and helps others reach salvation. I think I found this from an original radical Buddhist standpoint deeply problematic. Because for me, and I wonder, I would like to have maybe even violent responses from you, the point of authentic Buddhism is that precisely reaching nirvana is not this bullshit, you know, you are up there or whatever. You are still fully here, maybe even more fully here than before. You can still interact with others and so on, just in a different, let's call it naively, spiritual mode. This is already, I think, a wrong metaphysical reading, that nirvana means you go somewhere else out. You don't. But I think the moment you introduce the notion of bodhisattva, you already have to hypothesize in a metaphysical way nirvana. As it, again, it means you go somewhere, then you return here. No, you are all the time here. Second problem, I claim, connected with this one, and it's, I think, the problem of Buddhism. Believe me, I read books, I debated with them. It's the following one. Buddhism starts as, another ambiguity here, if you noticed it. I think that Buddhism, the way I see it, oscillates between two goals. One is minimal, the other is maximal. That is to say, on the one hand, the way, and I love these descriptions, great Buddhist thinkers describe nirvana or sunyata, or however you call it, satori in Zen Buddhism. They always emphasize that It's just a spiritual shift in you. Nothing changes in reality. You change, your entire attitude. Everything remains out there. On the other hand, you have this, let's call it radical ontic, in the sense of covering all entities, reading, where the idea is that since life is suffering, the global goal should be to basically to change everything so that even worms and so on, so that life as suffering would be redeemed, would no longer be here, you know. So this I find an effect of the same deadlock. Then the third one. Buddhism tries to argue that the problem is less suffering, and that somehow less suffering means you have to begin by elementary ethical training, you know. Be kind to others, don't steal, don't engage in promiscuity or too much passions, help others, and that these are necessary steps towards high meditative self-enlightenment. This is up to a point true, and it's typical. This is, I think, the big difference between our Western perception of Buddhism and the practice of Buddhism in countries like Thailand, whatever, where Buddhism is a way of life. That if somebody tells you I'm a Buddhist, it mostly means I meditate. For us, it's identified almost with meditation. But you know that very few people meditate in Asian countries. To be a Buddhist means mostly just to be kind, practice certain ethical codes, and then monks who meditate are more like a reminder to you that there is hope. You see, there are people who are there, who did achieve wisdom. But okay, now the problem with which many, many people are fighting is that why the hell should there be a necessary link between all this elementary goodness and nirvana enlightenment? And the more I think about it, the more I agree, and they are among Buddhists also present, with those, especially here, Zen Buddhism is the most honest. I almost admire Suzuki, who, you know, Daisetsu Taro Suzuki. When I was young in hippie times, he was the saint, the main popularizer, who says quite openly, Zen Buddhism is a technique of meditation. And that's all. You can be, he says, totalitarian, fascist, communist, capitalist. It doesn't matter. It's just certain meditative stance. And I think that one has to accept this gap. And it's a very painful gap. And here I think, again, the predominant Buddhism cheats. They try somehow to convince you that in order to arrive at nirvana, or whatever we call it, the 0 point, redemption, liberation of your false self, that you should be a good person, that you should start with that and then grow up. Things are here much more problematic. The reason that this is not true is precisely, for example, you will say, but the whole point of Buddhism is compassion. Compassion towards all living beings and so on. Yeah, but then, you know, you get the notion of compassion at war, for example. No? For example, Suzuki himself wrote texts in the late 30s where he, fully supporting a Japanese invasion of China, claimed this is a compassionate war. We intervened in China, killing millions, globally to lower the Chinese are like naughty children. They have to be disciplined to diminish their suffering and so on and so on. Even more, do you know that there is, and I have many cases of this, from Suzuki to others, for example, a book by Vernon Turner, Soul Sword, The Way and Mind of a Zen Warrior. Suzuki himself wrote about this, and he claimed that Buddhist enlightenment can be even very helpful in a war. Because, to cut a long story short, it makes much easier for you to kill people. No, he is very open here, Suzuki. He claims that if I'm still caught in my false self, perceiving myself as a free autonomous agent, then, Todd, you are the victim. I will reply to you. Let's say in a combat, I have to cut out your eyes and slaughter you. Unfortunately, I don't know why, I would have some problems doing this. But then a Buddhist friend comes and tells me, yes, I feel responsible, blah, blah, because I misperceive myself as an agent. And here comes Suzuki. I quote Suzuki. Suzuki claims, if the soldier is trained by Buddhism to abandon his false self, then the whole perspective changes. Let's say again, me, knife, you. I no longer experience this, I am sticking my knife into you. But it would be rather something like, I'm a totally neutral, I lose myself, impersonal observer of phenomena. I see there in the cosmic dance the hand with knife dancing around, and somehow in this cosmic dance, your body or your, what can we do? Your body or falls on it. You think I'm exaggerating? Look at, this is quote from Suzuki. It is really not he, the warrior, but the sword itself that does the killing. The warrior has no desire to do harm to anybody, but the enemy appears and makes himself a victim. It is as though the sword performs automatically its function of justice, which is the function of mercy. And I'm not kidding here. This was the attitude of Japanese army. Now, let me, to conclude, be very clear here. I'm absolutely not mocking Buddhism in any way. It's a tremendously important spiritual experience. I'm just saying, don't expect from it what you will not get. It's a spiritual experience, and the tragic gap that we have to accept is that you can be authentically enlightened in the Buddhist sense and at the same time a terrible torturer.